The scent of Mom's famous pot roast filled the dining room, but tonight it felt more like a Last Supper than a family dinner. I watched steam rise from the perfectly arranged plate in front of me, trying to ignore the tension crackling through the air like static before a storm. "Olivia needs the money more than you do, Sarah," Mom said, carefully cutting her meat into precise squares. "She's going to medical school. It's more practical than your business ideas." I glanced at my younger sister, Olivia, who was unsuccessfully trying to hide her triumphant smile behind her water glass. At 22, she was everything our parents had dreamed of. Straight A's, perfect extracurriculars, and now an acceptance to Johns Hopkins Medical School, the golden child. "Your college fund will cover her first 2 years," Dad added, not meeting my eyes. "It's the sensible choice." Sensible, their favorite word when it came to dismissing my dreams. I took a small bite of pot roast, letting the familiar flavors wash over my tongue. "I understand," I said quietly. They all looked surprised by my calm acceptance. They'd clearly expected tears, protests, maybe even the kind of dramatic scene Olivia was so good at staging when she didn't get her way. "Well," Mom said, clearly thrown off balance by my reaction, "I'm glad you're being mature about this. If only they knew." What they didn't realize, what none of them had bothered to discover, was that I hadn't needed that college fund for the past year. While they were busy praising Olivia's every achievement, I had been quietly building something of my own. It started 2 years ago, when I was 20. I was working as a barista at the local coffee shop, saving every penny I could. One morning, a regular customer, James Chen, forgot his laptop. When I caught up to him to return it, he was in the middle of a heated phone call about supply chain issues. I couldn't help overhearing the problem. His company's main supplier was charging exorbitant rates for basic materials, nearly bankrupting smaller manufacturers in our area, including, though I didn't know it then, my parents' furniture company. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the supply chain issues, about all the small businesses struggling. So I did what I always did. I researched. For weeks, I dug into shipping manifests, import regulations, alternative material sources. I created a detailed presentation outlining a solution. When James came in for his usual morning coffee, I handed him both his latte and my proposal. He called me that afternoon. 6 months later, I was his silent partner in a new supply company, Streamline Solutions. We undercut the existing monopoly, offered better terms to small manufacturers, and within a year, we had captured 60% of the local market, including my parents' suppliers. They just didn't know it yet. I took another bite of pot roast, watching my family discuss Olivia's bright future. Mom was already planning which apartment buildings would be suitable near the medical school. Dad was talking about introducing her to his doctor friends. My phone buzzed quietly in my pocket. A text from James. "It's done. Documents are signed. You now own controlling interest in Streamline." I allowed myself a small smile. Perfect timing. "Sarah?" Mom's voice cut through my thoughts. "Are you listening? We need you to sign the transfer papers for the college fund tomorrow." "Of course," I said. "I'll come by the accountant's office in the morning." "I really appreciate this, sis," Olivia said, her voice syrupy sweet. "I promise I'll make it worth it." If she noticed the slight edge to my smile, she didn't show it. Later that night, as I drove home to my modest apartment, I thought about how tomorrow would unfold. Mom and Dad had no idea that their furniture company, Anderson Classics, had been struggling for months before Streamline stepped in with better rates. They had no idea that their recent upturn in profits was entirely due to the company their impractical daughter had built. They were about to learn. My phone buzzed again. James. Board meeting tomorrow at 2 p.m. Right after your family's appointment with the accountant. Ready to shock some people? I typed back. They won't know what hit them. At home, I pulled out the document I'd been keeping in my safe. It was a detailed report of Anderson Classic's financial history, including every payment they'd made to their previous suppliers, payments that had nearly bankrupted them, followed by their dramatic recovery after switching to Streamline. My parents had always said I was bad with numbers, too dreamy, not practical enough. They never noticed that I was the one who spotted the problems in their company books when I was just 16. They dismissed my suggestions about finding better suppliers. They laughed when I talked about starting my own business. Tomorrow, the laughing would stop. I laid out my outfit for the morning. A crisp charcoal suit I'd bought myself with my first real profits. Professional, powerful, nothing like the artsy style my mother was always trying to correct. As I fell asleep, I thought about the look that would cross their faces when they realized who really owned their supply chain, when they understood that the daughter they dismissed had become the silent force keeping their company alive. The next morning dawned bright and clear. I arrived at Maxwell Accounting 10 minutes early, dressed impeccably, carrying a leather portfolio my parents had never seen. They were already there, Olivia bouncing excitedly in her chair while Mom fussed with her hair. Dad was making small talk with Mr. Maxwell, their longtime accountant. "Ah, Sarah," Mr. Maxwell said as I walked in. "We just need your signature on these transfer documents." I sat down calmly, accepting the papers he slid across the desk. Before I sign, I said, "I'd like to review something with everyone." I opened my portfolio and pulled out several documents. "Did you know," I began conversationally, "that Anderson Classics was 3 months away from bankruptcy last year?" Dad's head snapped up. "What are you talking about?" "Your supplier costs were unsustainable," I continued, laying out the financial reports. "You were losing money on every piece of furniture you produced, until, mysteriously, a new supplier came in with better rates." Mom's face had gone pale. "How do you know all this?" "Because," I said, finally letting my calm mask slip slightly, "I own that supplier." The silence that followed was deafening. That's impossible," Dad stammered. "Streamline Solutions is owned by James Chen." "James is my partner," I corrected. "As of this morning, I own controlling interest." I pulled out the final document, proof of ownership with my name clearly listed. "This is a joke," Olivia said, her voice rising. "Sarah doesn't know anything about business. She's just a barista." "Was a barista," I corrected. "Now I'm the majority owner of a company that supplies materials to over 60% of the furniture manufacturers in 3 states, including Anderson Classics." Mr. Maxwell, who had been quietly reviewing the documents, cleared his throat. "These appear to be in order. Miss Anderson indeed owned Streamline Solutions." Mom's hands were shaking. But you need this money for medical school," she said to Olivia. "No," I said, standing up. "She doesn't, because I'm not signing anything." "You can't do this," Olivia shrieked. "Actually, I can. And one more thing." I pulled out my phone and dialed a number on speaker. "Streamline Solutions, James Chen speaking." "James, it's Sarah. Please implement the rate changes we discussed." "Right away. Pleasure doing business with you, Miss Anderson." I ended the call and looked at my family's shocked faces. "Your supply rates just went up 20%. Still think I'm bad with numbers." Dad slumped in his chair. Sarah, please. The company can't survive that kind of increase. You should have thought about that before deciding I wasn't worth investing in. I gathered my things and headed for the door. Oh, and Olivia? Better start looking for student loans. I hear they're quite practical. As I walked out of the office, I heard Olivia burst into tears and Mom calling my name. But I didn't look back, because this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning of showing them exactly who they'd underestimated. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of board meetings, contract negotiations, and increasingly desperate messages from my family. Mom called daily, switching between tearful pleas and angry accusations. Dad's texts grew more frantic as their company's financials began to feel a squeeze. Olivia, predictably, took to social media, painting me as the evil sister who destroyed her dreams. I ignored them all. Instead, I focused on expanding Streamline's reach. James and I had acquired 2 smaller competitors, strengthening our hold on the market. Our office, once a small rented space above a deli, now occupied the entire 15th floor of the Gibson building downtown. Miss Anderson? My assistant Emma's voice came through the intercom. Your father is in the lobby. Again. I glanced at the security feed on my monitor. Dad looked smaller somehow. His usually pristine suit slightly rumpled, his shoulders hunched. Send him up, I said after a moment's consideration. When he walked into my office, he stopped short, taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows, the modern decor, the wall of industry awards we'd accumulated in just 18 months. Quite a view, he said awkwardly. Very different from the coffee shop, isn't it? I gestured to a chair. Please, sit. He sank into the leather seat, fidgeting with his tie. Sarah, we need to talk about the rates. The rates are non-negotiable. You're killing us. His composure cracked. Is that what you want? To destroy your family's company? I leaned forward, keeping my voice steady. Tell me something, Dad. When did you last review the company books yourself? Not just the summaries from your accountant, but the actual numbers. He blinked. I have people for that. Yes, you do. And those people have been skimming from the company for years. I pulled out a thick file and slid it across the desk. Your CFO has been hiding losses, inflating profits, and pocketing the difference. The rate increase exposed the fraud. Dad's hands shook as he opened the file. How did you? No, because unlike you, I pay attention. I've been watching Anderson classics since I was 16, trying to tell you something was wrong, but you never listened. Why didn't you just tell me about this directly? Would you have believed me? The dreamy daughter who didn't understand practical things. He stared at the documents, color draining from his face, as he recognized the scope of the theft. This will ruin us. No, I said quietly. It would have ruined you. I've already stopped it. His head snapped up. What? I pressed a button on my phone. Emma, please send in Mr. Chen and the files. James walked in carrying another stack of documents. Good afternoon, Mr. Anderson. I believe you'll find these interesting. 3 days ago, I explained, Streamline acquired controlling interest in Anderson Classics through a series of proxy purchases. We've already removed your CFO and his accomplices. The evidence has been turned over to the SEC. Dad's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. You see, I continued, I didn't raise the rates to hurt the company. I did it to force the fraud into the open, to protect what Grandpa built. You own Anderson Classics. 51%. You retain 40%. The remaining shares will be held in trust. Trust? For who? For any future Anderson who shows genuine business acumen. I smiled slightly, regardless of whether their dreams seem practical to their parents. Dad slumped in his chair, decades of certainty crumbling around him. Does your mother know? She will. There's a board meeting tomorrow. You should both attend. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Please, Sarah. We need to talk about Olivia's tuition. She's devastated. I showed Dad the message. Still think Olivia needs my college fund. He had the grace to look ashamed. We thought we were doing the right thing. No, you thought you were backing the sure bet, the safe choice. Well, here's what your safe choice has been up to. I pulled up security footage from last weekend. Olivia at a luxury car dealership, trying to put a down payment on a Porsche using forged documents with Dad's signature. She's been forging your signatures for years. I said, small amounts at first, then bigger ones. I caught her trying to take out loans in your name 3 months ago. Dad's face had gone from pale to ashen. Why didn't you tell us? Like I said, would you have believed me? He buried his face in his hands. What happens now? Now, I said, standing, you go home and talk to your wife and daughter. Really talk to them. Then tomorrow, you come to the board meeting and learn exactly how your impractical daughter saved your company. As he stood to leave, he paused at the door. I'm sorry, Sarah. We should have listened. Yes, you should have. But tomorrow isn't about apologies. It's about finally seeing clearly. After he left, James lingered. Think they'll actually show up tomorrow? I smiled, thinking of the other documents waiting in my safe. Oh, they'll show up. Because they still don't know the biggest secret. The overseas accounts? No. I pulled out one final file. Evidence that Olivia had been selling proprietary designs from Anderson Classics to competitors. They don't know that their perfect daughter is the reason the company nearly failed in the first place. James whistled low. You're not going to make this easy on them, are you? No, I said, watching the sun set over the city, I now quietly controlled. Because some lessons need to be learned the hard way. The Anderson Classics boardroom felt different from this side of the table. I sat at the head, watching morning light stream through the windows my grandfather had installed 40 years ago. The same windows I used to look through as a child, dreaming of the day I'd have a voice in this room. They arrived exactly on time. Mom, Dad, and Olivia, who hadn't been invited, but predictably crashed the meeting anyway. Mom's designer suit couldn't hide her nervous fidgeting. Dad looked like he hadn't slept. Olivia's face was fixed in her practiced innocent expression, the one that had fooled everyone for so long. Thank you for coming, I said, gesturing to the seats. Please sit. The board members filed in behind them, old friends of my grandfather's, mostly, who'd watched the company slowly decline without understanding why. They'd been shocked to learn about my takeover, but the preliminary financial reports had kept them quiet. Before we begin, I announced, I'd like to address the elephant in the room. Yes, Streamline Solutions has acquired controlling interest in Anderson Classics. Yes, I am now CEO. And yes, everything you thought you knew about this company's problems is wrong. I nodded to Emma, who began distributing thick folders to everyone present. What you're looking at, I continued, is a comprehensive audit of Anderson Classics over the past 5 years. Pay particular attention to pages 15 through 28. The room filled with the sound of rustling papers and sharp intakes of breath. Olivia's face had gone completely white. As you can see, I said, my voice carrying clearly in the stunned silence. Someone has been systematically selling our designs to competitors. Proprietary information, client lists, manufacturing processes, all leaked for a price. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. That's impossible. We have strict security. Using an internal executive access code, I cut in. One belonging to Dad, but accessed from a different IP address. One that traces back to a certain medical student's laptop. All eyes turned to Olivia. That's ridiculous, she stammered. I would never. I pressed a button on my laptop. The large screen behind me flickered to life, showing security footage of Olivia in Dad's office late at night, copying files onto a USB drive. Another clip showed her meeting with representatives from our biggest competitors. Then came the bank statements. Regular deposits into an offshore account under a fake name. $3 million, I said quietly. That's how much you made selling out our family's legacy. I can explain. Olivia jumped to her feet. It's not what it looks like. Sit down, I commanded, my voice sharp enough to make her drop back into her chair. I'm not finished. I turned to the board members. The good news is, we've already contained the leaks. Streamline's acquisition included implementing new security protocols. The stolen designs have been legally reclaimed. The companies that bought them are facing lawsuits. How long have you known about this? Dad asked, his voice hollow. Long enough to build an airtight case. I met Olivia's terrified gaze. Long enough to watch you try to steal my college fund while secretly bankrupting our family's company. Mom had started crying silently. But medical school was never going to happen, I finished. Because Olivia never actually got into Johns Hopkins. The acceptance letter was forged. Just like Dad's signatures on those loan applications. Just like her perfect transcript. I pulled out one more document. A letter from Johns Hopkins confirming they had no record of Olivia's acceptance. The money she stole wasn't for tuition, I continued. It was for gambling debts, luxury cars, designer clothes, all bought with the profits from selling our family's future. The boardroom had gone deathly quiet. You're fired, of course, I told Olivia. And the evidence has been turned over to the authorities. They'll be here within the hour. You can't do this, she shrieked. I'm your sister. No, I said calmly. You're a criminal who happened to share my last name. And now, you're going to face the consequences. Right on cue, 2 police officers appeared in the doorway. As they led Olivia away, her screams echoing down the hallway, I turned back to the stunned board members. Now, I said, pulling out another set of documents, let's talk about the company's future. Over the next hour, I outlined my plans for Anderson Classics. New designs, improved manufacturing processes, expanded market reach. The board members listened with growing enthusiasm as profit projections scrolled across the screen. When the meeting finally ended, only my parents remained, looking shell-shocked and aged. Why didn't you tell us sooner? Mom whispered. Would you have believed me over your perfect daughter? I asked. The one who could do no wrong. The one who deserved my college fund because she was more practical. Dad couldn't meet my eyes. We failed you. Yes, I agreed. You did. But this isn't about failure anymore. It's about moving forward. I handed them each a final document, new contracts outlining their reduced roles in the company. Still involved, but with clear oversight and limitations. Sign or resign, I said. Your choice. Their signatures were shaky but quick. As they stood to leave, Mom paused. Can you ever forgive us? I looked around the boardroom, my boardroom now, thinking of all the times I'd been told I didn't belong here. Forgiveness isn't the point, I said finally. Understanding is. Understanding that sometimes the quiet ones are watching, learning, building, and waiting for the perfect moment to show exactly who they've always been. After they left, I stood at my grandfather's windows, watching the city buzz below. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Olivia's arrest was already making headlines. Mom's social circle would be buzzing with gossip within hours. Dad's business friends would be calling nonstop. But I didn't care about any of that. Because I had finally done what I'd set out to do. Prove that practical dreams aren't always the biggest ones. That quiet ambition can build empires. That sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies, but succeeding so completely that they're forced to watch from the sidelines. Emma knocked softly. Your next appointment is here. The merger team from Pacific Coast Furniture. I smiled, straightening my jacket. Send them in. Because this wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of my empire. And this time, everyone would know exactly who built it.